That's my family. My wife Carrie and my 2 daughters, Taylor and Riley. I'm Mike. We live in the Puget Sound area, and given these crazy times, more than ever, I wonder about my daughters' future. How do we help them plan for today, let alone tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow? The way we used to do life is no longer working. I think that goes for all families. It's like we all need a new master guide for surviving and thriving in this 21st century. We have to move from stuck to unstuck and do more than just mastering marshmallows. For many of us, the year 2020 was like the big bang of chaos, crisis, and rapid change. It was a massive wake-up call. It's like someone opened Pandora's box and out came social and political unrest, a global pandemic, economic crisis. Geez, all that was missing was the alien invasion. We didn't have any skills to pull us through this situation. It felt like we were all living on the edge. The changes and enormous challenges were coming fast and furious, and all at once. So my journey to discover this new master guide for the 21st century all started one day at my home. It was back in 2020. We were in the midst of a pandemic, and when everyone first realized we're not going back to normal, and all this change is not something that's going away, we realized it was something we couldn't ignore.
Hey, good morning, honey.
Good morning.
What's going on?
Just working on college stuff.
How's it going? Thanks, babe.
It's okay. My life is just a bit confusing right now, and all of this just seems like busy work, as I don't even know if I'm going to get a normal college experience.
Yeah, it's been so long since we've seen normal, I don't even know what it looks like anymore.
Normal? What do you mean normal? Are you saying that soccer without teams isn't normal?
I didn't even know what to tell him. I didn't even know if every family was feeling this way. I mean, what is normal? What does today look like? What does tomorrow look like? All I knew is I was pretty tired of feeling helpless.
So I actually felt like I was in a dark cave looking for any sliver of light. In this rapidly changing, overwhelming 21st century world, the need to know what to do and how to handle it was pretty urgent.
Now to the coronavirus pandemic and the staggering loss of life.
Of people who just filed for new unemployment claims. It's staggering. The pain is so real, Allison.
Man, every day was new bad news. I wish somebody could make sense of all of this.
Well, Mike, the first thing you need to do is give it a name.
Well, what do you mean, General Casey? You mean the feeling? I don't know. Overwhelm? Everything coming at us at once?
Well, Mike, over my time here in the military, I've come to call what you describe here VUCA.
VUCA?
It was a term coined by the United States Army War College in 1989 to describe what they thought the world would be like in the aftermath of the demise of the Soviet Union. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
Well, we're sure in a heap of uncertainty. I mean, this is kind of the greatest challenge the United States has faced since World War II. I mean, day after day we hear bad news, more uncertainty and confusion. It weighs, pretty heavy on our hearts, our minds. How do we get over this, exhaustion?
So how do you combat all of this volatility, this uncertainty, this complexity, and this ambiguity that bombards us every day? What I've found looking and operating in the environment that we all confront today, I've found that all of this VUCA out there combines to impact a person's ability to understand, to communicate, to make decisions, and ultimately to act decisively. And to succeed today, you have to act.
So was there a way forward? Could using a military strategy give us a vision for our families, for our country, all of us? A vision forward during these times of crisis, chaos, and uncertainty? Okay, so I had a name for it, VUCA, and I was introduced to VUCA through General Casey. I mean, he didn't really just pop up on my screen until I went searching for answers. The big aha was that this VUCA was a military strategy. The military had already identified this chaotic uncertainty, this new normal, what we're going through now, like 30 years ago. And even though I'm a proud Navy veteran who's been in the military and veteran space for decades, I've even written a couple books, I had never heard of it until I went digging. Why? Because it's a secret known to less than 1% of the population. Born out of the fog of war and used by American Armed Forces, think tank experts, futurists, and masters of chaos management to not just plan for crisis and radical change, but to actually prosper during chaos. And I discovered there were actually two sides to VUCA, a negative and a positive. And you could actually take advantage of VUCA to unlock your unlimited potential and thrive in chaos. But first, let's look at what each letter in VUCA's negative side stands for.
You know, I learned the V was for volatility.
Volatility turns your world upside down. COVID was a perfect example of volatility. The changes due to COVID-19 were unpredictable, and they were moving at alarming speeds, and the impacts were pretty devastating to our lives, to our jobs, and to our businesses.
That will ripple for years. The U is for uncertainty.
No one can predict with confidence what can happen in a VUCA world. It's like playing blackjack. You may hold a great hand, and you might even know the odds and want to bet big, but the next card could break you. Uncertainty leads to emotional shock and indecision.
So we feel disoriented. We feel like we're out of control. The C is for complexity.
The volume and nature of information in a VUCA world is staggering and overwhelming. It's like we're being asked to play chess every day, but without fully knowing the changing rules. So you don't know what the right move is.
The A is for ambiguity. VUCA is dominated by unknown unknowns. What is causing what is unclear or confusing.
And just relying on experience can get you totally lost.
It's like being in a giant maze. You have no roadmaps to follow, no landmarks, and no information. Every turn is just kind of a guess.
So when you think about it, all of the stuff that we're going through, and all of us are going through it right now, it has a name, and it's called VUCA.
So now you have a name for what you're going through. Today and in the future, it's VUCA.
So whether I'm training a Navy SEAL candidate or a corporate executive or a mom, the first thing they need to recognize and accept is this. We are in a VUCA world now, and it is accelerating. The future is moving faster and faster, faster than we think.
When things are accelerating very quickly, when we're in VUCA conditions, the old story, the old solution isn't going to work, especially in a world of exponentially accelerating technology, where the opportunities and the possibilities are not where we would normally look for them.
Several years ago, I read a book by a young man named Joshua Ramo called Age of the Unthinkable.
What's unthinkable about our era is that we're trying to manage constant newness with ideas that are ceaselessly failing.
And he talked about our world in terms of grains of sand coming through an hourglass and organizing themselves into a cone at the bottom. And from the outside, that cone looks relatively stable. But the reality is it's very unstable, because every one of those grains of sands are connecting with another one in ways we can never understand or appreciate. And you never know which grain of sand coming down from the top of the hourglass will cause the whole sand pile to collapse. And really, that's our world. We have an increasing number of players entering every day, and they are connected in ways that we can never fully understand or appreciate.
One thing was clear. We couldn't solve 21st century problems with 20th century thinking. We needed a master guide to surviving and thriving in the 21st century. There were no roadmaps in a VUCA world. But as a father, I wanted to give my daughters a needed compass, some guidance to go forward. So my plan was to unpack this VUCA and go deeper. Find the greatest modern mentors and sages of VUCA, like generals, warrior philosophers, best-selling VUCA thought leaders, scientists, therapists, to help us find the light at the end of the tunnel, the antidote to negative VUCA, the fear of the unknown. It's critical to flip the script on VUCA so you can take these battle-proven military strategies to unlock your unlimited potential and achieve the biggest dreams of your life, even in this fast-moving, disruptive, chaotic, uncertain 21st century. This quest totally changed my life and my family. VUCA became my North Star. I thought differently about everything. And I wanted to share my unimaginable life-changing discoveries with you and your children and their children, and essentially the world.
49% of small businesses failed during the last year. That's incredible bad news inside of this VUCA world, but it's also an incredible time for an entrepreneur. Experts are saying that wealth will double in the next 10 years, so there's also a lot of possibility inside this VUCA world. And every week there's an opportunity for an internet-sized idea.
We're going to tell you how to tackle the impossible and thrive in the 21st century, even in the worst VUCA conditions.
We need to approach this VUCA world with new skills, new thinking, and new ways of training.
The clues that something was different about the world began in the 80s. Remember those simpler times, boom boxes, mixtapes, giant cell phones, VHS, crude video games, computer floppy disks? MTV was the only screen kids watched. There was no internet, no social media, no streaming. But even then, 1987 to be exact, the United States Army War College saw signs that the volatile world was becoming more interconnected, more networked, more uncertain, and dangerously ambiguous. And it was changing at the speed of digital technology. So what is this mysterious war college? Well, for over 100 years, the Army War College has pioneered concepts in military training, national defense, peacekeeping, and innovative measures to prepare our country for a changing world. It has prepared the nation's foremost military leaders, Generals Dwight Eisenhower, George Patton, Omar Bradley, Alexander Haig, William Westmoreland, Admiral William Halsey, Norman Schwarzkopf, Colin Powell, and William G. Boykin. The War College defined the global environment we would face in the 21st century as a VUCA world like we've never seen before. VUCA was a strategy for steady leadership in an increasingly uncertain and unstable world. VUCA perfectly presages what is happening in the world today. And today, the Army War College is known as VUCA University.
My first introduction to VUCA was at the Army War College just after 9/11. I was shown a photograph by the commandant at the War College at that time, Bob Ivany, and the photograph showed Special Forces officers riding on horseback in Afghanistan, linked to satellites, controlling targeting on the ground, riding with Afghan tribesmen. It was the adventure that came to be the movie 12 Strong. Then a team of 12 Green Berets were inserted into Afghanistan to liberate the region from the Taliban. It was a freezing land of impassable trails and 100-foot cliffs against a volatile enemy of hard-to-distinguish targets using high-tech satellite connections, cell phones, and internet from caves. And who was friend or foe was ambiguous.
When you see a man with an AK who is dressed just like your enemy, you have no idea whether he's going to put out his hand and shake it or he's going to shoot you.
The story of the horse soldiers best explains where we are now, in a world that's driven by crazily, exponentially accelerating technology disruption. We need to play a different game. This small team on horses had amazing successes and victories. Why? They could adapt quickly, make fast decisions, even in challenging, chaotic, uncertain, and complex situations. And they had the agility to achieve incredible accomplishments.
Now, a lot of what we talk about here when we're addressing VUCA are presented as modern military strategies, the psychology and the neuroscience and the application of these things to warfare and to business. But these tools tap into a philosophy that's drawn from the ancient warrior traditions, such as the Spartans, the samurais, or even the ninjas. These ancient warriors trained the whole warrior. They didn't separate between training the physical over here and training the mental over here or the spiritual over there. And they fought that way, and they dominated their VUCA environments in that way. Now, if you haven't noticed, today's world, both at a corporate and professional level as well as at a personal level, looks a lot like a battlefield, doesn't it?
You know, this idea of a battlefield isn't just for the military world. You can open one of the most sacred spiritual texts, the Bhagavad Gita, and what are you going to see? You're going to see a reluctant warrior, Arjuna, being counseled by his god Krishna to go do what he needs to do, to play his role well in the midst of a war. Again, this is Gandhi's sacred Bible, right? Gandhi, the peace activist, studied his hero going to war and doing what needed to get done, again, in the face of VUCA, in the face of uncertainty, playing his role as heroically well as he possibly could.
So I now work with the new 3-star generals at the Army War College, and we talk about how the VUCA world can be flipped from negative, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, flipped in a positive way. So volatility can be countered by vision. Uncertainty can be countered by understanding. Complexity can be countered by clarity. You need to be very clear where you're going, but very flexible how you get there. And finally, ambiguity can be countered by agility. We all need to be agile. We need to be so agile, physically, mentally, and even spiritually grounded in the face of this very threatening VUCA world, that we can flip into something positive.
So I now knew there were two sides to VUCA. On one side, there's volatility. On the other side, vision. Uncertainty, understanding. Complexity, clarity. Ambiguity, adaptability, and agility. But what does that mean? It's obvious you're just scratching the surface. He's right. It's obvious I had to go deeper.
Vision is related to that perspective. When you can take a broader perspective and you can tap into the knowledge and the wisdom of your heart mind, and your belly mind, then you can expand your vision and have more clarity on the VUCA battlefield.
And understanding comes from having the capacity to meet everybody in every situation where they're at, not where you want them to be, to see things from their perspective, even if it's your opponent or your competitor.
And clarity comes out of complexity. It comes from the only things you can control, which are your attributes, your thoughts, and your emotions. And so by waking up every day, instead of immediately plugging back into the VUCA chaos, you are going to do what we call win in your mind before stepping foot into the battle.
And finally, adaptability, agility comes out of ambiguity. By learning how to fail forward fast, expecting the challenges to be there, and you're having a contingency plan, that backup plan. In a VUCA world, if a plan A doesn't work, then go to plan B, and then go to plan C, and go to plan Z, whatever you need to do. But don't give up, don't stay down. Don't be a victim of the circumstance. Use that to propel you, use that to rise, use that to declare who you'll be in the world.
And what does this positive side of VUCA do? It's how things that were stuck get unstuck.
Hierarchies work fine in slow-moving, linear, more predictable worlds. They don't work in the VUCA world because they're not flexible enough. So in a VUCA world, what wins is what I call a shape-shifting organization, where there's no center. If it's leadership from behind, you can move very fast because you don't have to check up the hierarchy all the time. So leadership gets spread across the whole organization. So leadership is everybody's responsibility. Everybody needs to be a hero.
In a VUCA world, everybody is called to be a leader. It is the new hero's journey for the 21st century.
So you know what the word hero literally means? In ancient Greece, they didn't name the word hero after tough guy or killer of bad guys. The word hero literally meant protector. Protector. A hero has strength for two, and a hero is willing to do the hard work to have that strength for two. And a hero's secret weapon was love. It's love that gives us the courage to be willing to act in the presence of fear, the self-mastery to do what needs to get done, whether we feel like it or not. And if you haven't noticed, in our world today, we need heroes more than ever before. We need you to be a hero.
Okay, so now we've recognized it's a VUCA world and we all need to be heroes. That's the first step. The next step, as General Casey tells us, is this necessity to act.
Leaders need to have an offensive mindset. They have to have a mindset that allows them to impose their will on their environment and create the future they want through action.
Which led me to stories. The necessity to act and heroes are what stories are all about. It's why we love movies. Stories make sense of this VUCA world.
Storytelling is critical in the VUCA world because there's no absolutes. There's no clear answer to where we're going. In fact, the VUCA world is laced with dilemmas, which are essentially problems you can't solve, problems that won't go away, but you can make them better. You can make them better with clarity, and then a great story that expresses that clarity and motivates people to pursue it.
Stories take us into the unknown, the uncertain. It's why we love movies. It's why we love theater. Stories built this theater. In a VUCA world, stories are essential, and they teach us about facing conflicts and overcoming obstacles, and truly overcoming our fears.
So it's stories that help us find meaning in this VUCA world.
So, what is the meaning behind my story?
Is craziness a part of the story?
I would say that everything we experienced in 2020, the story is we're all searching for answers.
That is the hero's journey.
I love journeys.
Wait, but what is the hero's journey?
That is a great question. Okay, we've said VUCA is the new hero's journey for the 21st century. So, what does that really mean? Well, if you look at any great hero story, you're going to find a total VUCA environment. Crisis and conflicts, trials, tests, dragons, demons. The great philosopher and mythologist, Joseph Campbell, is the father of the hero's journey. He spent years in a cabin in Woodstock, examining the greatest ancient stories, myths, and legends from all over the world. He emerged with a revelation and a revolutionary book. This one, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. He identified that all these heroic stories are really one reoccurring pattern. Campbell discovered that all stories are basically the same story, a monomyth that transcends all cultures across all time, because it was a story framework that told our journey as human beings. Campbell found we all go through stages to become the best versions of ourselves and give service back to the world. And if we look at the classics of cinema, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey has impacted almost every one of them. From Harry Potter, the Marvel movies, Rocky, The Wizard of Oz, Braveheart, Lord of the Rings, The Matrix, and Campbell's most famous influence is on George Lucas and Star Wars. But let's start at the beginning. The hero's journey starts with the recognition that the status quo, the current story, no longer works. There's a recognition of negative VUCA interrupting your life, your world, or your galaxy. So now there's an urgent necessity to leave that old story behind and create a new story, or you face the consequences of not moving forward. To do that,
the hero needs to take action and answer the call. Now the hero must leave their cozy comfort zone and head out into the scary unknown. At this point, resilience is required to overcome inner fears, doubts, weaknesses, and gain new strengths and skills. So the hero, with the help of guides, gains higher capabilities and greater perspective to flip the script on negative VUCA and move towards positive VUCA and create a new story. Now the hero attains foresight to seize new opportunities to succeed. And at the very last part of the journey, the hero receives wisdom and courage, what Campbell would call the elixir, those gifts that you give back to the world. Now you're the sage, the guide, the one inspiring others to create their new heroic stories.
So breaking free from your old story requires first that you got to be aware that you're living in a story. This is a world that you've created for yourself. It's a narrative, a kind of script that you're following. And you've got to break out of that, and you've got to create a new story. You've got to get a new destination, a new character, if you will.
How do people get off their old story? There's a saying that your past will keep sitting in your future until you complete with your past. It makes it harder to focus and to not be paralyzed if you stay stuck in the past. How do you create it into a new story, a new reality? I could have been a victim. I could have drugged the story around of being an abused child, of having a horrible marriage. But the reality was I had to look at how do I turn that around, especially in a VUCA world and volatile times.
You have to think about it like this. By now, you know VUCA is a whole new ball game. Don't let it stop you. You can't sit on the couch. Take control of your story. Get in the arena and act. Ultimately, it's the story that you tell yourself that's responsible for who you are and how happy you become.
And you're not on this ride of passage alone. Sometimes this feels lonely, but you're going to receive guidance. You are going to meet mentors, you're going to meet guides, and you're going to meet sages. The Obi-Wans, the Yodas, and they're going to give you new skills so that you can face these inner demons and these outer dragons.
But getting from an old story to a new story, well, we'd have to change our thinking and our brain.
If you think about it, our mental conditioning is a kind of a program. We respond to things out of this program, out of the story that we're living. But here's the fun part. You can edit the code. You can change your story. You can create a different destination. You can become a different character. It's all up to you.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that the world we live in thinks that somebody else is writing your story, but it's actually you writing your story. And every single day you are writing your story. And one of the things that I don't want people to fall trap to is the fact that they don't have a story, because every single person has a story.
Moment to moment, we are creating our story. We are getting further from or closer to our goals.
So to get from an old story to a new story, we first need to understand that the brain is organized with neural synaptic pathways. That means that our previous behaviors and response patterns of the past, our old story, is programmed in the brain in pathways, and it's reinforced. So now if we want to adopt a new story, we need to go in and rewire the brain. We're going to need to adopt new synaptic pathways, but the existing ones are very, very strong.
Negative VUCA can be incredibly toxic. It can weigh us down. It will flood our bodies with cortisol and other stress hormones. It's going to make us suffer and feel anxious and feel depressed. And we need to counter that with VUCA resilience hormones like oxytocin, dopamine, and all those endorphins.
When we decide to step into our fear, we're given a reward. We get a hit of dopamine, a natural neurotransmitter that gives us a boost. And it's a tremendous boost. It tells us to keep going, keep moving forward towards that objective. And it's not just when we reach the overall goal, it's every step that we take along the way. So our body is telling us, hey, this is good. Initiate, persevere, have tenacity, have fortitude. The brain is rewarding you for achieving. And this is by evolutionary design. We as human beings were designed to keep moving towards those things that we sought. New shelter, new food, new land.
How do people get off their old story into a new, successful new story? First is clarity. You have to have clarity in your vision and that new story. Next, you have to visualize. And I'm talking about getting in tune with how it feels, how it smells. The key is having that dynamic focus that makes the difference.
Remember, chaos is creativity. Creativity is born in chaos. My first business was born because I got a divorce, and then I was left with 2 little girls with no child support and no alimony. I had to be creative. I had to be creative in my mess, and then my mess became my message.
The reason why your message matters is because of the opportunity that sits in front of us, sits in front of you to change the world. Like whatever you want to do, you want to impact relationships, you want to impact business, you want to impact people's health, you want to impact their mindset. You can do all of that in a VUCA world.
How do you remain optimistic in the face of so much VUCA? Well, that's the challenge of this new hero's journey, right? So when the story you tell yourself no longer works and you need a new story, just remember, that's you growing and waking up to new possibilities. The good news is, the brain is wired to move from an old story to a new story. It's called neuroplasticity, and it's how the brain changes and adapts.
So one of the things we got to get with the hero's journey is the fact that when we go out, we leave our comfort zones, we enter the forest at the darkest point, which is our true path. We're not going to sidestep lizards, we're going to battle dragons. And as part of that, we're going to face extraordinary challenges. And we need to quit telling ourselves the story that this shouldn't be happening. That's exactly what should be happening when we're on a hero's journey.
Well, we've certainly all faced extraordinary challenges.
So these extraordinary challenges are supposed to be happening?
Battling dragons? Seriously?
So that is the edge of your comfort zone.
Exactly. It's important to remember that all great stories and the hero's journey begin at the edge of our comfort zone. That's where we go through the ordeals, we go through the pain, and we find our inner light. So VUCA squeezes what might have been subliminal, whether it's in our unconscious mind or the collective unconscious of our culture. It dredges up what was under the surface and in the dark and makes it conscious. It brings the old story that's not working into the light. Did you know the word subliminal comes from the Latin limen, which means doorway or threshold? And that threshold or doorway to the new story is beyond what Joseph Campbell called the veil of the unknown. Now the unknown is scary. There's a temptation to stick your head in the sand or hide under the covers or just stay in your comfort zone, spending your life playing video games or just consuming stuff. But that comfort zone is sort of a trance. It's really a negative place. You're not growing. It's like the Matrix. That's the illusion of reality. That's the blue pill. Reality is VUCA. That's the red pill. It separates you from the illusion of the comfort zone. It's the call to action, the call to adventure. It's when Neo found his true potential, his true self. And we must realize that these old stories that we tell ourselves are our Achilles heel. That's what's holding us back from being Jedi Knights. That's what's sabotaging our unlimited, yet to be discovered potential. Dorothy's journey wasn't to escape Kansas or defeat the Wicked Witch of the West. She was on a journey to change the old story that she was telling herself. Remember, she wanted to fly. She didn't want to be an ordinary farm girl. She wanted to be extraordinary. The red shoes were just a metaphor for the power within her that she had all the time. But without VUCA tests and challenges, she never would have confronted her inner barriers. You can't stay in Kansas, Dorothy, if you want to find Oz on the other side of the rainbow, on the other side of the threshold of fear, apathy, doubt, insecurity, weaknesses. That's where your greatest opportunities and achievements are. So we need to purge those old behaviors, those old systems, to adapt to a new world. We must go outside our comfort zones and confront the unpredictable, the unknown, because the unknown is the domain of creation. It's where the new innovations are, where the new ideas and discoveries come from. You know, the Chinese symbol for crisis is really two symbols. The first one is danger. The second one is opportunities. These also symbolize the two sides of VUCA. So once again, every great story is a hero's journey through a VUCA world. It catapults us to greater versions of ourselves and gives meaning to the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, and the ambiguity. That's the lesson in the ordeals. That's why all these stories and the hero's journey resonate with all of us. They show us what's possible, what you're capable of overcoming, and who we're capable of becoming. Remember, the ultimate hero is the person that you look at every morning in the mirror. It's you.
As we learned, every story has a path. At this point, we've undertaken the quest. We've recognized VUCA. And now we're ready to go beyond the status quo to a new story. And ready to enter new worlds and embark on a new heroic journey for the 21st century. But to meet the VUCA challenges ahead, all of us are going to need much more guidance and training. Okay, so we're answering the call, ready to leave our old story behind and embark on this journey toward positive VUCA. But first, following the heroic path, I needed to develop some resilience. I had to build some inner muscles and cultivate habits that countered the super stressful VUCA world.
In this VUCA world, it's important to keep that razor's edge. Look at every day as if you're a warrior stepping into the breach, like one of those ancient warriors would have. And you might have to deal with an actual firefight of some sort. We'll all need to learn to live and to lead with that mindset. You could call this VUCA warrior training.
So now for some VUCA warrior training to help us navigate through the challenges and inevitable obstacles that lie ahead.
Let me ask you a question. Are you a warrior? Right? Are you a VUCA warrior? VUCA demands more from you. More energy, more strength. When you go into battle, you need ammunition. And your ammunition is your mind, your body, your spirit.
Particularly during these days of COVID, economic freefall, civil unrest, and the normal challenges of life, everyone wants to be resilient, even if they don't really know what that means.
One of the things that happens in the uncertainty of VUCA is we lose our energy. We start doing things that deplete our energy, and we need to build that up because science says, if you look at the science of positive psychology, the number one virtue most highly correlated with your flourishing is your energy, your zest, your vitality. So we need to pay attention to that and do the little things that boost our energy. Eating, moving, sleeping, again, training our attention. We got to do everything we can to get our energy strong to deal powerfully with all of this VUCA uncertainty.
So we have to manage energy. We have to create and sustain positive energy to be grounded in the face of the VUCA world.
VUCA will demand more from you, more energy and more strength and more awareness. You're going to have to stock up on these inner arsenal tools. They are your secret weapon. Your mind, your body, and your spirit is your arsenal to take on your VUCA journey. You need these as your ammunition.
To combat the chaos and the confusion and the negativity. A lot of us get stuck in the chaos and the confusion, right? VUCA, when we look at it, it's that volatility that we all experience in life. It's the uncertainty of what do I do now? It's the complexity of what comes first. There's so many times in my business that I didn't know where to start. There were so many times in my personal life I didn't know. It was so complex and I had to take baby steps. And then the ambiguity of what's next.
So I like to think of it this way. You know, life is kind of like a gymnast beam. And if you think of the other side of the beam as the destination, the place where you're trying to go, or the place you're trying to take your company or your team, it obviously takes a tremendous amount of agility on that beam, a constant balancing and rebalancing of priorities to stay on the beam. And the truth is, even if you fall off the beam, you can get back up. Why? Because that's resilience.
Sometimes in life, when you're a warrior, you don't know where you're going. When you're a VUCA warrior, you're like, I don't know where I'm going, but I know I need to charge. Are you ready to make a stand? Because if you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. It is your time. This is the time to be your own hero.
Look, in a VUCA world, all bets are on you. When the world is conspiring against you, create your own destiny. Be your own rescue. Don't wait for the knight in shining armor. Be your own shining armor.
We all have hidden superpowers. We all have hidden powers within us. Did you know Superman's real identity wasn't the fumbling Clark Kent? He created that identity to fit into a world where his superpowers actually made him feel alienated. His real identity, of course, was Superman. And how many of you are Superman hiding behind a Clark Kent?
The reality is that we all get body slammed. In good infantry terms, some days you get the bear, some days the bear gets you. A simple way to look at resilience is to think about a tennis ball and an egg. You're familiar with an egg, and you're familiar perhaps with the bedside poem, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses, all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. We drop an egg, it shatters, never to be put together again. Regrettably, that illustrates the absence of resilience. Conversely, we have a tennis ball. The tennis ball, as you well know, bounces. We can hit it as hard as we want, we can bounce it as hard as we want, and it keeps on ticking. It takes a licking. And the bottom line is, would you rather be an egg or a tennis ball? The clear answer is that we'd like to be tennis balls. We would like to be resilient. It means to return to original shape after stress is applied. It means basically to bend but not break. But I think resilience is far more than just bouncing back.
So did you guys like that? Was it scary enough?
I mean, I could take more. Yeah, the scarier the better.
Really? So we actually like scaring ourselves, going outside our comfort zones, that rush of adventure, that blast of adrenaline. But what if we learned to love being scared in real life? Like, really loved it? What if we weren't so fragile? What if we could become anti-fragile? Sound crazy? Not in a VUCA world. We need to learn to be anti-fragile.
So clearly being flexible is important when we're talking about dealing with VUCA, but I think we want to go even further. We want to be anti-fragile, which is one of my favorite words of all time. I picked it up from Nassim Taleb in his great book called Anti-Fragility. Now look, we can be fragile, which means we break easily when we face challenges, or we can be resilient, which means we can deal with challenges to a greater degree, we bounce back faster, etc. But what's the opposite of being fragile? It's not being resilient, it's being anti-fragile, where we literally get stronger the more we get kicked around. So one way to think about it is the wind. The wind will extinguish a candle, but it will fuel a fire. And if you haven't noticed, these days with VUCA, it's like we've got a hurricane wind and we better have a strong fire. That's what I think is most important in terms of how we want to show up in the face of VUCA.
When you are feeling most throttled by VUCA in our modern world, how do you cultivate resilience? Well, it starts by controlling the controllables. Focus on those things that you can control, those basics right in front of your face.
So all that begs the question, how do we actually cultivate our anti-fragility? We got to control the simple stuff, eating, moving, sleeping, focusing your attention. That's when you need to be most disciplined on the core fundamentals.
It's human nature to resist pain and discomfort. But you need to become resilient, even when your brain is telling you, no way, no thank you.
Guess what? When life is challenging, we need to make sure we are paying attention to those basic fundamentals, and we're working our protocol in such a manner that, as my coach Phil Stutz puts it, the worse you feel, the more committed you are to the protocol. The more challenging life is, the more committed you are to the protocol.
We actually need to feel a relatively modest degree of resistance and discomfort so that we can practice going through the discomfort and then building trust in ourselves that we can get through it. And that's actually how the brain builds resilience.
So a lot of people like the mantra OM, O-M, OM, which is fantastic, of course. But in our work, we like to talk about OMS, O-M-M-S, as in obstacles make me stronger. That's the mantra of a hero facing VUCA. OMS, obstacles make me stronger.
So let me tell you a story that might drive this point home. You know, 1941 was not a good year in the Pacific. Japanese invasion, Pearl Harbor, all of that.
That since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan, a state of war has existed.
Robert Preston Taylor went to the Philippines in 1941. He got there and he'd been there a couple of months, and soon he found himself on the Bataan Death March. 65,000 Allied soldiers, prisoners of war, being marched to their prisoner of war camp. Many would fall by the wayside, get bayoneted. And yet Robert Preston Taylor was a real chaplain. He was a great friend to those, and he was helping, he was carrying people in every way. They got to the prisoner of war camp. Over half of them had died. And Robert Preston Taylor soon learned that guerrillas outside the wire had medicines, little ointments that would prevent these life-threatening tropical infections and diseases. He started going out, coming back in, giving it to his fellow prisoners. You can imagine how much they revered him for his selfless service. One night he was coming back in the wire and he got caught. And the Japanese threw him into a hell box. It was a pit in the jungle, maybe 4x4, and they put him in there and bamboo over the top as a covering. Every now and then he got drops of rainwater that came in. He was there for days and then weeks. Finally, they took the top off. It was blinded by the light and so forth. And a couple of fellow prisoners lifted him out of this hole, and he was emaciated. He couldn't even stand up. And as some of the pastors that might be listening to this, or caregivers or chaplains, as is so typical, his fellow prisoners gathered around him and they said, "Chaplain, what's the good word?" And he said, "Oh, give me a break. I've been in the..." He didn't say that, but he was ready in season. He said, "Well, let me tell you what I learned, men. I learned that we should not doubt in the dark what we believed in the light. Do not doubt in the dark what we believe in the light." That is so important. So in the light of day, in the light of fair winds and following seas, in the light of times when we can set the right conditions, get the right reflexes, train ourselves to be ready and resilient, we should do that so that in the dark of doubt, despair, discouragement, woundedness, whatever the darkness is, we are able to cling back to what we knew to be true in the light. So relevant, so practical, words of wisdom from a person that went through the toughest that man can endure.
Okay, so we've covered the first 3 chapters of my journey. We've recognized the old story, the necessity to act, and started to work on our VUCA warrior attitude to combat obstacles on our journey. We've created new habits in our minds and in our bodies, bolstered by anti-fragile resilience. Now we're ready to flip the script from negative VUCA towards positive VUCA and gain new perspectives, foresight, and courage, and truly enter new realms of human possibility. We're moving to vision, to understanding, to clarity, and to adaptability. Like Darwin said, the species that survives is the one most adaptable to change. Mark, what are we doing here?
We're going to flip the script on VUCA, Mike. We're going to change your perspective. You see, you've been thinking horizontally this whole time. It's not going to work anymore. We got to get you to think vertically.
What does that even mean?
That's where the answers lie.
It sounds like Jedi Knight stuff. And it is in a VUCA world.
Horizontal development is like what we did in Navy SEAL training, where you learn how to get better at a skill, such as diving. But that doesn't necessarily change you as a human being. Whereas vertical development, that's going to be development that moves me up the scale of awareness, or consciousness, if you will. In vertical development, you're working on yourself so that you can be more, see more, have greater perspective on things. This dramatically increases your field of potential and allows you to perform at a much higher level.
It's like shaking a snow globe upside down. It's snowing and you can't see anything. And if you're inside that snow globe, it's all blurry and fuzzy, and it doesn't look like there's a way out. The transformation that comes with vertical development, you can step outside of that snow globe.
Most people have no idea how negative their minds are. They don't understand that the brain is hardwired to be negative. It's 5 times as negative as it is likely to be positive.
How do we combat that negative belief, that negative conversation? We all have it, right? Some of you have consultants up here that you're listening to that you shouldn't be listening to. And the reality is your net worth will only go as high as your self-worth.
Furthermore, the brain is being constantly filled with all of this negative and fear-based information from the news cycle, social media, politics, you name it. It's up to us to override all that, to push back and to block it out. And that's an internal job.
The whole ideal of flipping the VUCA script is the difference between doing things different and being different. So the big question is, how do you be different?
You see, we've never been taught to do this vertical development. As a nation, or as a Western culture, historically, we spend too much time and effort on those horizontal skills in the past. The new hero's journey is the journey within, working both on our beingness, how we show up and who we are, alongside our doingness, how well we execute and get things done.
Of course, being different, I understand that completely, means we have to change our stories, think differently, and embrace the unknown. And see every obstacle is an opportunity to flip the script.
That requires us to learn new ways and new skills in order to thrive, such as tapping greater emotional awareness, accessing your higher consciousness of your will, increasing your intuitive intelligence, and developing spiritual and moral strength. And when we can do that well, we're able to expand and evolve as human beings.
When you hear the term vertical development, it means you're really moving up the scale of awareness and consciousness. And these skills, they've been mapped out by developmental psychologists, by neuroscientists, and by Eastern spiritual traditions.
You know, we've all heard, what if there was an app for that? In a way, this horizontal to vertical learning was like finding human VUCA apps. You could call them accelerated personal performance systems. VUCA apps that help us flip the script, putting us in a heightened mode. I found myself entering a whole new universe of human evolution and capabilities, truly for humanity, that will lead to new confidence and abilities to achieve the impossible.
So I became a journalist in the early 1990s, and at the time the 2 things I was most curious about were action and adventure sports and neuroscience. Neuroscience was especially interesting in that period because we were starting to get our first picture of how human behavior worked. And action sports in the 1990s was a very peculiar time. It's often referred to now as the great era of impossible, where more so-called impossible feats, things that had never been done before and most people believed would never be done, weren't just being done in action sports, they were being iterated upon. So we were seeing the impossible after the impossible after the impossible in surfing and skiing and rock climbing and snowboarding and the like. This raised all kinds of questions about where this huge uptick in performance was coming from, where the limits lie. But what really captured my attention, what really fascinated me, is that action sports in the early 1990s was a very kind of rowdy punk rock, not mainstream activity. And most of the athletes involved and most of the people I knew came from very unusual backgrounds. They had difficult, rough childhoods, broken homes. really disadvantaged childhoods. They had very little money, they had very little education, and yet here they were on a semi-regular basis reinventing what was possible for our species. And I was fascinated by this question of how are they doing this, what was going on. And I knew that it was time to take this question of what does it take to do the impossible into pretty much every other domain imaginable. Science, technology, art, culture, and so forth. And discovered a lot of things. At the heart of what I discovered, whenever you see the impossible become possible, you tend to see two things. You see people harnessing disruptive, accelerating technology, and you see people expanding human capability. And I've created the Flow Research Collective, where we study the neurobiology of peak human performance. What's going on in the brain and the body when people are performing at their best, when they're taking on so-called impossible feats. Whenever you see a significant improvement in performance, whenever you see the impossible become possible, you're seeing a bunch of different things, but you're always seeing a state of consciousness known to researchers as flow.
Now, you may know flow by other names. You may call it that runner's high, or being in the zone, or being in the moment. Stand-up comics will sometimes call it the forever box. The jazz musicians will say they're in the pocket. And the writer and the artist will say it's when the muse comes through to them.
Flow is defined scientifically as an optimal state of consciousness where we feel our best and we perform our best. And throughout flow states, all aspects of performance, both mental and physical, go through the roof. Now, the uptick in performance that we see in flow is significant. Motivation and productivity skyrocket. Creativity and innovation also go up. Learning accelerates. Empathy, environmental awareness, strength, speed, and reaction time all significantly increase. This is what flow brings to the equation.
Flow is revolutionizing the way we live and work. It's not just for extreme maverick athletes and Navy SEALs, but for Silicon Valley execs, for artists, really for anyone.
More specifically, flow refers to any of those moments of rapt attention and total absorption. You're so focused on the task at hand, so focused on what you're doing that everything else just seems to disappear. Action and awareness are going to start to merge. Your sense of self, your sense of self-consciousness diminishes. Time dilates, which is a fancy way of saying it passes strangely. Sometimes it'll slow down, you'll get a freeze frame effect. More frequently, it speeds up and 5 hours go by in like 5 minutes.
The magic happens when your passion and your proficiency come together. When you can do that, when you love what you do, and when you're really good at it, that's when you're going to experience the most flow. Where you start a project and you look down at your watch and you go, oh my gosh, it's already lunch. Where did the time go? That's flow. The only question is, how do you know if you're in flow?
What's it feel like to be in a flow state? What's it feel like to experience it? If you want to talk VUCA, it's flying with the Blue Angel. First, you're flying an F-18 jet. When you first climb into that cockpit, it's new, it's big, it's powerful. Okay, you learn how to master that jet. Now that's called horizontal development. But a lot of times when you're flying formation, you're going into the sun, you're going in and out, the earth is spinning, you're over water, you're over land. You have to find a way to put your teammates together. You're only 18 inches from each other. The weather's changing, there's constant variability, and there's complexity all around you. And you're flying at 600 miles per hour. That's when you need to have what we call vertical development. That adaptability, this higher ability to become one with your airplane. When you can become one with another airplane or another person in that jet, this allows you to fly formation. At this point, you actually are no longer thinking about the aircraft. You're no longer thinking about the corrections. It's not stick and throttle anymore. You are at one with your teammates. You are in a flow state. This oneness is a higher state of consciousness. This higher state of consciousness is a feeling tied in with high performance.
The beautiful thing about this vertical development is that we're evolving. We're becoming more whole and more capable as human beings.
And here's what's powerful. The vertical development that comes from that sticks with you. Once you feel it, once you've done it, you can re-access this at any time.
This brings us much greater perspectives, which then naturally allows you to even grow further and faster. And you very quickly begin to dominate your VUCA environments.
The reason flow is so important in a VUCA world where everything is moving really, really rapidly, there are a couple things that are worth knowing. The first is that the human brain is limited in today's world. One of the reasons flow is so important in a VUCA world has to do with how the human brain evolved. The human brain evolved in an environment that was local and linear. Local meaning most everything that we dealt with was roughly a day's walk away. Linear meaning the rate of change was really slow. So your great-great-grandfather's life was roughly the same as his great-great-granddaughter's life. Today, we live in a world that is global and exponential. Global, it happens on the other side of the planet. We hear about it seconds later. Our computers get it milliseconds later, right? And exponential, meaning the rate of change is extremely fast. Forget about the difference between great-great-grandparents and their great-grandchildren. Now the differences from month to month, sometimes week to week, can be incredible. The human brain did not evolve to process information at this speed or at this scale. In fact, the only time we can keep pace with this speed or this scale is when the brain is in flow. The reason has to do with how the brain produces this state of flow. Simply put, there are 5 really potent performance-enhancing neurochemicals that all seem to get activated in flow. And what they do is they surround information processing in the brain. So when we're in flow, we take in more information per second, we pay more attention to that incoming information, we find faster connections between that incoming information and older ideas, and we find farther flung connections between that incoming information and older ideas, and then we're quicker to act on that information as well. In other words, flow surrounds the brain's information processing machinery. It appears to be the only time when we can process information at speed and at scale.
There was also another great human app based on military strategy to help us flip the script on negative VUCA, to not just react to a threat or challenge, but to actually make fast, consistent, right responses.
Air Force Colonel John Boyd was one of the most legendary fighter pilots on the face of the earth. He was known as 42nd Boyd because he could win a single dogfight within 40 seconds. He studied everything, mostly psychology and philosophy, and he came up with an idea that is known as the OODA loop. What is OODA loop? It's observe, orient, decide, act. The piece that Boyd thought was the most important was orientation. See, orientation is different from observation. In tough, confusing, and uncertain VUCA situations, we often get stuck. We get frozen in not accepting things because we wish they were different. Orientation is your relationship to reality. It helps us properly orient ourselves in a VUCA world, to see our own weaknesses, biases, and flaws. We don't get stuck in our ego and need to be right. That means releasing old habits and old stories.
Imagine the secret power to victory lies in letting go of biases and getting out of our own way.
The new hero's journey is the journey to expand and evolve as human beings. It also cultivates what we call whole mind thinking. It takes you to this world-centric orientation, and you're radically focused not on just your needs, but the well-being of others. This is where we're going as a society of humans in our 21st century VUCA world, away from the type of leading that's good for one party, one country, but damages the others or the world. VUCA requires that we have a response that is world-centric and healing.
I was flying now. My quest to understand VUCA had led me to discover revolutionary human apps. Take this vertical thinking and master it to use in wise, useful ways that would lead to mind-blowing physical and mental breakthroughs that actually are already expanding and evolving human performance. We're entering the next stage of the quest, beyond just overcoming VUCA. This journey had led me to new truths, to the point in the hero's journey where the hero captures the elixir, that knowledge that helps all of us thrive in the 21st century. To paraphrase the novelist Marcel Proust, our greatest opportunity is not found in new frontiers, but in seeing what is in front of us with new eyes. We all have the ability to be far better than we have ever been. Foresight gets us there.
And all this foresight is not about predicting the future. It's actually humbly anticipating it. Or as Yogi Berra used to say, it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. Unless, as Bob Johansen says, you have future-back thinking.
So I'm often asked as a futurist, how can you do 10-year forecasting? I can't even do 1 or 2 year forecasting. Well, the reason is because it's easier to look future back. And most companies, at the most, think 5 to 10 years ahead. There's a few that go further out than that. I did a recent exchange with a group in the military studying China. They're often thinking 200 years back. Now, nobody in our government is thinking 200 years back, but we have to have that discipline, a real different. Nobody in our government that I know is thinking that far ahead. And that's a challenge for us. That's a real dilemma because we've got competitors out there that are getting much better at thinking future back than we are. And we're stuck in the polarities of the present.
Turns out the human brain has a real difficulty thinking into the future. Most of us have an internal time horizon established by evolution that is basically a season ahead. One of the really cool things about foresight, we talk about the retrocasting process. So put yourself in 2030, think about the conditions you might want to see in 2030, say an end to climate change. Then ask yourself what has to happen in 2029 for that to be possible, what has to happen in 2028 for that to be possible, and so forth to today. And it's a way of sort of goal setting for the future, foresighting that takes into account exponential technology, where the technology is going to be now and where it's going, and it allows you to kind of think about the future in a way that sort of gets past our innate cognitive blind spots.
It's amazing to me how many people don't future back plan. It allows us to see around the corner. It allows us to prepare and set goals for today and then anticipate what happens in the long term. It gives us the insight and the intuition. So you can see it, because once you can see it, you can achieve it.
As a Blue Angel, I had to be ahead of the jet. I had to be thinking about the future. And the way that you do that is to go backwards and have a plan and have contingencies. So you have to have your game plan, you visualize it, you execute on it, and then you most importantly learn and adapt to the current environment.
And then we have the foresight to create a mission around that vision and what Jim Collins calls BHAGs, or big, hairy, audacious goals. Bigger and hairier than you've ever taken on in your past because they're tied to a bigger vision which will have a global impact.
Living in a world of accelerating VUCA, we really need those big, hairy, audacious goals to inspire us to have something, a vision to look forward to.
So this vision thing is confusing to a lot of people because they've never been taught how to do it. Not in business school, not in university, usually haven't been mentored by someone who understands it. But it's as simple as this. It requires stepping into the future, looking back, and describing what you see. That's it.
You know, the thing that I've found that a BHAG does for me and all of the people we work with is when things don't go well, when there's disruption and things are getting in the way, having that BHAG and that purpose allows us to overcome and get on the other side because there's something greater that we are fighting for.
VUCA is about bigger than life dreams. In a VUCA world, you must pursue your biggest, hairiest, most audacious goals and dreams. This is about life dreams. This is positive VUCA. If you want to get to the most biggest, most challenging, the best you can ever be to achieve your dream, this is about reaching the best of the best and then getting better. This is about growing and impacting as many people as you can. Now, a team of individuals can achieve what an entire industry used to do. So build your empire, impact 1 billion people.
The interesting thing about these grand challenges, so-called moonshots, the godfathers of goal-setting theory, Locke and Latham discovered simply creating a high-hard goal will give you an 11 to 25% boost in motivation. That's huge. At the moonshot level, you see something else that's really interesting. My friend Salim Ismail, who is the original president of Singularity University, Silicon Valley, where they study exponential technology and they study how to apply it to grand challenges. He took a look at the 100 fastest growing companies in the world, and he discovered they had all set moonshot goals. They had all created massively transformative purposes, and it was one of the secrets to their growth.
So now, a great example of massively transforming an organization by VUCA-proofing it and creating an epic historic BHAG is the incredible U.S. Coast Guard boat lift story.
The Coast Guard-led 9/11 water evacuation was bigger than Dunkirk. On that tragic morning of September 11th, 2001, following the terror attacks on the World Trade Center, hundreds of thousands of people found themselves trapped in Lower Manhattan, desperate to escape the burning chaos that was Ground Zero. And for many, the only way off the island was by water. People were even jumping into the water, unprepared for the perilous harbor currents that swiftly pulled them out towards sea. It was a VUCA situation. However, the VUCA planning for crisis and chaos allowed the commander of Pilot 1 Coast Guard boat to make a big, creative VUCA-type decision.
So I was sent out as a relay just to pass information. Saw people jumping into the water trying to swim to Brooklyn. The smoke plume was just forcing people off the island, so made the call of all available boats.
So the local commander issued a call for all available boats to aid in the evacuation.
All available boats. This is the United States Coast Guard. Anyone who wanted help with the evacuation of Lower Manhattan, report to Governor's Island.
There were over 100 vessels that ended up responding to that radio call. We had tugboats, we had dinner cruises, we had some were very large, the Staten Island Ferry.
And suddenly, an armada of vessels appeared on the horizon. Tugs, ferries, police boats, recreational and private vessels, all answering the call to evacuate the southern tip of Manhattan. One of the advantages of VUCA training was that if I'm a Coast Guard commander in a VUCA nightmare, I don't have to wait to go to my boss to ask what to do. I can go out and do it. An untold number of water rescues were performed that morning by mariners. By nightfall, different vessels crewed by an estimated 800 plus mariners had executed a successful boat lift with surprisingly few injuries or incidents. The water evacuation of over 500,000 people was conducted by the Coast Guard with remarkable poise and efficiency. The evacuation in numbers was bigger than Dunkirk. The 1940 World War II evacuation of 338,226 soldiers by mostly private vessels.
Of course, the Coast Guard prides itself on preparation when responding to emergencies. But it was a decision to VUCA-proof themselves and formulate future strategies. This future back-thinking that allowed their commander to make a BHAG decision and adapt quickly in the accelerating, disruptive, and truly uncharted waters of VUCA.
So how do you succeed today where others don't? Do you accept the fact that your world is going to be volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, but you don't accept the fact that external factors will determine your results? You take ownership of those results.
So what does that mean for you and your business? Well, the Coast Guard's experience is a model that everyone can learn from. The Coast Guard as a response organization has to be prepared because we go into environments where other people need to be rescued. And the key difference between being a rescuer and a victim is preparation. And the rescuer is prepared and the victim is not.
We can't predict the future, but what we can control, what we can think about our future, is visualizing the role that you want to play in it, the role that you want to play in changing your circumstances and ultimately humanity.
One of the outcomes of an expanding perspective as well as a world-centric point of view is that we're capable now of holding a bigger vision for our own future, both personally and as organization. And so we can then consider that our mission in life maybe is much bigger and can have a profound impact on not just the bottom line, but also on humanity's future.
In a VUCA world, there's no place for average. We can no longer take an average approach to changing things. VUCA is about being bigger, playing bigger. And so are you playing inside of that? Are you playing safe? Are you playing small?
So we don't want to be future blind. We need to envision our future, even in chaos and crisis. Think about it. When John F. Kennedy fearlessly proclaimed America was going to the moon, the world was VUCA and close to nuclear war.
If you're going to 10x a problem, you use Google's definition of what is a moonshot, right? I want results that are 10x what any other solution can give me. The idea goes back to the Kennedy era. We were trying to get to the moon. We had none of the existing technology. We had no idea how to do it. Something we were supposed to do it by decade's end, and we pulled it off. That's a moonshot. It's a usually audacious goal that tends to motivate a lot of people to head in that direction.
There's a story about JFK when he was president on his first trip to NASA that really crystallizes the challenge and the importance of driving VUCA insights down into really all levels of the organization. When he was visiting NASA in 1961, he was on an official tour, and on his way, he noticed a custodian mopping the floor, and he momentarily left the tour and walked up to the gentleman and said, "What's your job here?" And the custodian said, "Mr. President, I'm helping to put a man on the moon."
One thing that's important to realize is strategic foresight allows us to take control of our story.
Absolutely. Yeah, strategic foresight allows you to take control of your story. You could think of VUCA like the wind, and it hits, as a sailor, I'm very familiar with the wind, and the wind will hit everybody indiscriminately, and it doesn't care which direction you go. So you can either let that wind of VUCA push you and control which direction you're going, or you can use that wind to go in the direction that you want to go. And that's what strategic foresight allows you to do. And take control and use VUCA not as an external influencer that controls your outcome, but as an opportunity to go the direction that you want to go. And in controlling your story and seeing VUCA as an opportunity, as a person or certainly as an organization, you can build a competitive advantage by recognizing opportunities when others are just struggling to deal with the uncertainty that's being thrust upon them. VUCA can be seen as a negative influencer, a threat that we have to be able to manage, but ultimately VUCA can be an opportunity. It's just something we have to be ready for. It's life. And developing a way to think about VUCA and think about the long term and how short-term decisions affect long-term thinking is a way for us to be in control of our own destiny and not be victims of external influencers and actually develop the future that we want to be a part of.
We're in the home stretch of our VUCA journey. We've wrapped up transformative new VUCA warrior skills and dramatically improved our capabilities and potential. We've discovered the power and art of achieving the impossible and how foresight puts wind in our sails and allows us to control our own destiny. Now that we are filled with confidence, let's put our newfound inner courage to work. So are we all ready to unleash our heroic light on the world? Well, first we've got to know about courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, though. And like VUCA, courage is accumulative. The more fear, challenging, or threatening the VUCA, the greater life's lesson, and actually the greater life's reply, which is courage.
Courage in the face of total volatility, uncertainty, confusion, and ambiguity. There are certainly stories that are really more personal to me, for example, is what we know as Black Hawk Down. When I was a commander of the Delta Force, we were in Mogadishu, Somalia in 1993, fighting for our lives. We'd gone into the city about 3 o'clock in the afternoon by helicopter to capture some warlords there, men that we desperately wanted to bring to justice. And all of a sudden a Black Hawk was shot down. When that Black Hawk was shot down, we had the epitome of VUCA. Absolute epitome of VUCA. And what that did is it changed our whole plan. Everything that we had expected to do was now changed. When you are dealing with that kind of VUCA, that kind of uncertainty, you have to expect that the enemy gets a vote. Well, in everyday life, we have to expect that our adversaries get a vote.
So when you look at ancient wisdom and modern science, Aristotle tells us that courage is actually the virtue that vitalizes all the other virtues. Just like your heart pumps blood to your other organs in your arms and legs, courage, which etymologically literally comes from the same word as heart, vitalizes all the other virtues. And modern science says the same thing. Modern science says that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the willingness to act in the presence of fear.
I used to think that being courageous meant that you didn't have any fear. Now I realize that being courageous simply means that you do it scared.
As we look at courage, we need to understand a couple of things first, and that is that there are two types of courage. There is moral courage and there's physical courage. But certainly in a world of VUCA, moral courage is actually more important than physical courage. And as you said, courage is not the absence of fear, it's overcoming fear. Then perhaps the greatest story of courage is really the story of America. You know, our nation's legacy of courage spans from the Mayflower's landing through the passengers on Flight 93 that overpowered hijackers on 9/11. But also I want you to think about the young men and women that have fought against ISIS and Al-Qaeda since 9/11 and showed such incredible courage as they've defeated these two organizations. Now, the Pilgrim faced a perilous journey on rough seas. Families cramped into close quarters on a small ship, facing an uncertain life in an unknown world. And have you ever wondered what happened to the 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence? Brave men that signed their own death warrants, in fact. Well, 9 of them died. Some of them were actually captured and tortured. Others lost everything that they had. And keep in mind that these were some of the most wealthy and elite men in the 13 colonies who signed that declaration and gave up everything. And how about when it comes to a pandemic? Nothing matches the crisis that nearly derailed the whole American Revolution. When George Washington took command of the Continental Army in 1775, America was fighting a war on 2 fronts. One for the independence from the British, but the second was for survival because of a smallpox epidemic. Washington had contracted smallpox as a teen, and he knew it was the invisible enemy that could cripple his army and end the war before it began. He took it very seriously and became the country's first public health advocate. He isolated his soldiers and staved it off with the first massive state-funded immunization campaign in American history. The general's bold move proved critical to the revolution's success. We have to understand that America was built by those who made brave decisions in the face of fear and had the fortitude and the courage to risk it all for a better future. Pioneers that crossed the open plains in covered wagons, those who fought in the Civil War to end slavery, fought in World War I and World War II, or stood up for equal right. Those who braved depressions and dust bowls and atomic bomb scares. Back in the 1960s, people were fearful of nuclear holocaust and were building fallout shelters in their backyard. John F. Kennedy interrupted that negative story with a big, hairy, audacious goal, or a BHAG as it's known.
But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills.
Kennedy said, "We will go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard." Kennedy was flipping the VUCA script toward positive VUCA. Change will never stop. But America has proved that those who persevere can make big, bold, brave decisions and change the world. Daring vision is what made America the greatest country in the world. Edison invented the light bulb. Roosevelt created the National Park System. The Wright brothers created the airplane, and Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic Ocean. And all the courageous business visionaries from Henry Ford to Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, courage is the gift of VUCA. Because courage calls for boldly going where no man has gone before. Courage is not easy, it's hard, but it's the way to defeat VUCA.
That's right. VUCA calls us to boldly go where no one has gone before. And to use another Star Trek saying, at warp speed.
If you want to understand where these VUCA conditions are really coming from, you have to understand exponential growth in technology.
And to explain just how fast the future is moving, faster than we think, let me give you an example. For the past 100,000 years, we've used linear thinking. So what do I mean by that? If I take 30 linear steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you guys get the picture. I end up 30 feet away. But in a digital age, the age we're in now, we have to think at the speed of technology, and exponential acceleration, and exponential growth. And exponential growth is really deceptive. Let's say we program the Space Needle elevator to take us up 30 exponential steps. And we stepped into the Space Needle's magic exponential elevator, moving at accelerated rocket speeds. If we go up 30 exponential floors, we keep doubling our speed every floor. 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, 8 becomes 16, 16 32, and so forth. Suddenly, we're at floor 1 billion. We're 1 billion feet away from where we started. We're in space.
Back in 1964, Gordon Moore founded Intel. He noticed the number of integrated circuits on a computer chip been doubling every 18 months. He went, wow, this is incredible, this is amazing. Every 18 months, every year and a half, my computer gets twice as fast, but the cost stays the same. He said, I'll bet this lasts 5, 10 more years. Well, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, Moore's Law, this exponential growth curve. It's the reason why the smartphone in your pocket is 1 million times faster, 1 million times cheaper, and 1,000 times smaller than a supercomputer in the 1970s.
And in this exponentially accelerating age, there are so many exciting technical advancements happening in the field of science, in the field of health, in the field of space. And so you have to change your mindset from one of fear to one of positivity.
Ray Kurzweil, who's the head of AI at Google, who's probably the smartest guy on the planet on exponential growth, back in the 1990s discovered that once a technology becomes digital, once you can program in the ones and zeros of computer code, jumps on the back of Moore's Law, starts accelerating exponentially. Well, there are now 10 to 15 technologies, sensors, networks, AI, robotics, nanotechnology, computers, and so forth, that are all accelerating our own exponential growth.
And if you look at a VUCA world today, it's going fast, right? Think about our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents. Like, just think about the telephone and the stamp. We don't use stamps anymore, right? We want to look at what did all those innovators have in common to get us where we are today. The one thing that stood out was the courage to take action, the courage to risk, like to risk it all to get it all, right? Are you willing to put it all on the line? Are you willing to invest your money in your idea and your future? Are you willing to risk it all to get it all? That's courage.
What's even crazier is these formerly independent lines of technology are starting to converge. They're overlapping. You're getting a whole is greater than the sum of parts effect. In my recent book, The Future is Faster Than You Think, I looked at this phenomenon and we looked at it through the lens of the 11 largest industries on Earth and what's going to happen to them over the next 5 to 10 years. To put it in context, Ray Kurzweil has said because of these different independent accelerating and converging lines of exponential technology, we are going to experience roughly 20,000 years worth of technological change before the end of the 21st century. This means in the next 80 years, we're going to go birth of agriculture to the Industrial Revolution twice. What we found when we examined what's going to happen over the next 10 years, 100 years worth of technological change. So if you think back to where we were roughly 1920, 21, and fast forward to where we are today, 2021, and pack all that change to 10 years. It means every major industry on Earth is going to be reinvented over the next 10 years. It means there's more opportunity for people who can master these VUCA conditions than ever before. We're going to see more wealth created over the next decade than ever before in history.
I was really getting the scope of this exponentially accelerating VUCA universe. Not just the bad stuff, but the good stuff as well. And what's going to happen over the next 10 years as the scale of progress and abundance goes up.
I'm 72 years old, and even when I was 50 years old, I could not foresee the kind of innovations that we have in this country today. No one could, except those that had the foresight and the courage to step out into the unknown and to go after something that others didn't believe in. That's you.
Did you know? Today, a young girl with a cell phone in an African village has access to better communication technology than the US president did 25 years ago?
So yes, this is a massively rapid amount of change in the world, but if you can master this change, the opportunities are colossal.
Okay, one more VUCA-sized reflection on the future. And from this vantage point, as we look down on our beautiful little blue marble, it sure looks like one holistic place. It's time for some big picture VUCA wisdom. You know, the new hero's journey for the 21st century will require more empathy, courage, and moral character. It requires great courage to not have biases. It's not always easy to show up for each other. To do that, we have to say no to putting people in boxes or categories and to be in service to the bigger idea of a common humanity. To paraphrase what we say in the military, one team, one fight. In this case, one planet, one mission.
There's never been a time when leaders need to be more empathetic. People are craving the opportunity to be heard, to be seen, to be recognized. And as leaders, we've got the magic, if you will, to be able to give that gift to people. It doesn't cost us anything. It just costs our time and attention.
People often ask me where all this work leads, and what I like to talk about is empathy for all. This is empathy for all people, of course, but it's empathy for plants, animals, and ecosystems. It's empathy that extends to the whole of the biosphere, so we can start functioning as a single planet, truly.
Abraham Maslow created the hierarchy of needs, and he said that as we ascend that hierarchy and meet some of the lower needs, we get to the point where we need to express the best version of ourselves. And he says, what one can be, one must be. We can call that the universal quest that we're all on. And it begs the question, what must you be?
What do you hope for future generations? Right? What do we hope for our children? What do we hope for our children's children? Part of that is, it starts with us. Are you willing to stand up? Are you willing to get up? Are you willing to be the change that the world needs you to be?
So on the hero's journey, we battle our dragons. We're not sidestepping lizards. We face our challenges. We conquer our inner demons. We become the best versions of ourselves. But that's not the end of the route. Where we need to go is bring the boon back. We need to bring ourselves back into civilization and give our gifts to the world.
The evolution of consciousness, you could say literally one person can change the trajectory of humanity. And using that example, you could say that Jesus or Buddha or even Mahatma Gandhi was one individual who had evolved such a discrete inner awareness that the way he showed up in the world changed the course of human history. Now imagine if we had 100 million people thinking that way, or 1 billion.
Dad, this is really cool. I think I'm gonna like the future. Yeah, and now I know. Don't wait for opportunity, create it, and you are your only limit.
Honey, can we go back to Earth now? I think we're gonna be okay.
So Taylor and Riley, this is VUCA. our new hero's journey for the 21st century. I now understand when we go beyond the negative VUCA, the doom and gloom news, and get closer to the possibilities and abundance in the VUCA future. Everywhere you look, you see incredible reasons for hope. I hope you now understand how taking advantage of VUCA helps you not only tell a new story for yourselves, but experience unlimited opportunities, and how this knowledge will help you, your generation, and future generations make a difference in their lives and the planet. So we'll all live in a better world, a more joyful world, where we celebrate our resilience, our courage, and create magnificent futures by using VUCA as fuel for our growth and fuel for our heroic quests. Now when the future comes at you fast, you'll be ready. The days ahead may be filled with more chaos, uncertainty, confusion, but now you know. It's VUCA.